Check.
Thank you so much. Talofa with a smile. Talofa with a smile. I just need to clarify something. I just need to clarify one thing, and that is Moi Moana has stolen my crown. Like Miss Tuvalu's been looking for that crown, and you just better give it back, girl, after tonight. Welcome to our creativity and climate change in the Pacific. And while people are still settling, there is an exhibition happening somewhere related to Chogam here, sponsored by the British Council, and in the exhibition there's a poem I wrote called Girl from Tuvalu. So I'll read that to you now. Girl sits on porch, back of house, feet kicking, salt water skimming, like her nation, nowhere to go, held up by Kyoto Protocol, an inconvenient truth. This week her name is Silingia. Next week her name will be Girl from Tuvalu, environmental refugee. Her face is 10,000. Her land is 10 square miles. She is a dot below someone's accidental finger pointing westwards. The bare-chested boys, bravado and sea spray, running on tar seal. They are cars, they are bikes, they are fish out of water. Moana waves a hand, swallows a yellow median strip. Moana laps at pole houses in springtide, gulping lost piglets and flapping washing. Girl sits on porch, kicking. Thank you, whawhatai, te le lava. So just a bit of context setting. The Commonwealth Foundation's cultural work is founded on the belief that art and creativity can catalyse social change. From the annual Commonwealth Short Story Prize, which I was blessed to have hosted in my raggy lava, but it looked really good on camera. The most accessible and international of all writing competitions, to the creative grants projects in the online literary magazine Ada, the Commonwealth Foundation aims to build a community of cultural change makers, or artivists, who work together for justice in the Commonwealth and beyond. This evening's session, what a treat, I'm so excited for you and for me, we'll start with a set of live performances which will inspire our panel discussion, exploring how different forms of creativity, including photography, storytelling, poetry, music and dance, can be used to advocate for climate justice in the Pacific region. Our panel, whom I'll introduce in a moment, will discuss the cultural implications of the climate crisis in the Pacific and highlight traditional and present-day examples of communities preparing for climate events and building resilience. As ever, we'll have our now famous Q&A session afterwards, so get your questions ready. Now, with my academic hat on, I'm just going to define what a question is. It's la da 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 da. So question mark at the end, or da 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 da, question mark at the end. Okay, thank you so much. So before I introduce our speakers and performers, I wanted to mention that this session is linked to our Climate, Our Future photography competition. I plugged that very hard, and I saw some wonderful people taking scans of the QR code. And we are all together now. All right, so first up, Okalani? Okay, so I'm just going to introduce the whole panel, or one at a time? The whole panel, okay. So first up, can I please invite to the stage, stage or no, because they're live performances? And then they can leave, okay. Come on up, Okalani Mariner, Samoan artist, poet, environmental activist, and social entrepreneur. As a neurodiverse individual, she advocates for inclusive spaces for neurodiverse people in Pacific communities. As co-founder of One Look Studio, she aims to empower youth through meaningful work and social connections. She is a Pacific climate warrior and the youngest elected National Human Rights Advisor for Children and Young People in Samoa. Okalani uses spoken word and poetry to share Pacific people's frontline truths and stories to advocate for climate justice. Big round of applause for Okalani. Can I invite up Rosaivita Solomona, a versatile performance artist from Samoa. Oh, feels like a beauty pageant, hey? I've kind of taken on the MC of a beauty pageant. Known for her work as a soprano, violinist, and contemporary dance choreographer, as well as an advocate for music education. She recently co-founded Solfa Music Samoa with her brother Filton. Filton, where are you? Could you put your hand up? Is he here? Typical younger brother, never there when you need him. Okay, all right. An initiative focused on developing a holistic and relevant music curriculum tailored to the unique needs of Samoa and the wider Pacific region. With over 12 years of experience as a music and performing arts tutor at the National University of Samoa, Rosaiviti continues her family's musical legacy, encouraging fellow Pasifika musicians to take ownership of and foster pride in their cultural heritage. Please give Rosaiviti's mother, who I understand is in the audience, would you just wave to everybody? A big hand. Come on up, Michael Dom. Michael Dom, come to the stage, yes. Of Simbu origin, Michael was born in Port Moresby, Papua New Guinea. He writes poems in English and Tok Pisin and also translates them into hiri motu. He's been hailed by fellow writers as PNG's unofficial poet laureate. I tip my hat to you, sir. Michael has written a few short essays in English and Tokpisen on topics related to poetry, writing, and the importance of participating in creativity. He co-founded Bless Sing Sing, a writers' support group and website that hosts poetry and essay competitions, assists with editing and publishing, and also has an e-magazine. Thank you for joining us, Michael. And now the person who stole my crown, Moi Moana. Why don't you come up here, Miss Shrinke? Moi Moana Shrinke. A proud daughter of Samoa, she is the current Miss Pacific Islands. Does that include Tuvalu? No, anyway, I'll talk to you later. Enough already, my last joke on that, I promise. And former Miss Samoa. She advocates for youth, culture, education, and environmental sustainability across the Pacific. Her work centres on preserving Pacific cultural heritage and promoting sustainable tourism. At present, she works with Samoa Tourism and the Ministry of Women, Community and Social Development. She is the founder and director of Tā Whisi La Whai Creative and Performing Arts Initiative. Moi Moana has engaged over 1,000 young people in Samoa. She has represented Samoa at COP26 and COP28, advocating for climate justice. Moi Moana is also an acclaimed performing artist and a fire knife performer, which she will showcase for us this evening. Not on stage. Just right about here, right, Mum? No. And last but not least, Joe, please join your whānau. Joe Moiona Kolio is the Chief Advisor Pacific for the Fossil Fuel Treaty Initiative, leading projects to build a global coalition advocating for phasing out fossil fuels to maintain the Paris 1.5 goal. Joe has advised on climate policy across Australia, Aotearoa, New Zealand and Europe since 2015 and was appointed an advisor to Pope Francis in 2018. He's shifted to using arts, culture and traditional knowledge to move climate narratives and make the crisis resonate with our hearts and with our minds. In early 2024, he established the Creative Arts Project, This Is Our Home, Pacific Artists for Climate Justice, which brought together a collective of gifted Pacific artists to put their artistic talents in service of the Pacific struggle for climate. You're in for a treat, ladies and gentlemen. Please put your hands together for our artists. Okay, all right, well, okay. Right, we've just had a little program shift. We're going to do the panel now because you're all seated so beautifully, and then you can showcase your work. All right. So remember my definition of a question. Excellent. All right. Here's a question. Please answer as you see fit. Why are artistic interventions and other forms of creative advocacy important in the fight for climate justice in the Pacific? This is open to you all. Moi Moana.
Talofa and Pacific greetings, everyone. To allude to the question, why is artistic interventions important in the fight for climate justice? I think art and cultural arts and culture specifically for Indigenous peoples, Samoa and the Pacific, it's able to communicate very complex and technical ideas in a way that's more relevant and accessible to our children and young people. At the heart of a lot of my work, I try and focus on how I'm going to express messages to children and how these very science-based, and all these technicalities are able to be understood by our children, who are very much, in our minds and hearts when we talk about climate justice. In the Pacific, I've always thought that the Pacific way of doing things should be the way of the world. And I know we have a lot of our Commonwealth family in the room right now. And I hope that you feel in your trip in Samoa the very Pacific way of doing things. And that's very much founded on our cultural values of love, service, reciprocity, not only to each other, but to the natural environment. And I think our cultural arts through Siva Samoa and Siva Afi, which is our different types of traditional forms of Samoan dance, they really encapsulate this essence of the philosophical way that we do things in the Pacific. We love on Mother Nature in the same way that she loves and nurtures us. There's so many examples of this, but I might allow one of the other panelists to elaborate.
Sure. Joe, what do you think? Why is what we do and how we do it important in the fight for climate change advocacy?
Thank you, Talofa, everyone. I was mulling over this question last night because it really goes to the heart of why we're all here and the work that we collectively do. I would go further than just saying that it's important. I would say it's absolutely essential. Our history has shown us the power of arts and culture in driving social change, and how it's a conduit to igniting the masses to do that sort of thing. So, yeah, for me, it's not a nice to have, it's an absolute essential. And I think for the climate justice movement, activism in its traditional form has not yielded the results that we're after. We're no closer to achieving climate justice. The 1.5 goal seems further and further away. And I think part of the problem is that we aim all our climate messaging at the brain. We try to get people convinced to do this work through science, through data, through dry policy documents, all of which is important, but we then ignore the rest of the self, the heart, body, and soul. And so I think bringing that element into our work is really what's been demonstrated to show people coming on board, and I think that's why it's essential.
Thank you.
No, I think I just echo what my sister Moana and Joe have also shared. I think when I think about why interventions are so important, I always think back to a lesson I learned very early on, which was no one will remember what you have done or what you have said, but they will always remember how you feel and how you've made them feel. And I think with art, it's the perfect way to really, really push a narrative in a way that incites feeling. And I think that's what's so beautiful about art. I might be cliche in saying that as well, but medicine, legislation, policy is so important, but art is what makes you live. It's what makes you keep going. Love is what drives you. Your family is what drives you. That is what keeps you going. At the heart of everything you do, there is always somebody you're doing it for, or a community you're doing it for. And art and creativity and interventions such as this are so beautiful because it allows you to reflect that goal in a way that everybody can feel and not just understand through words.
Talofa everyone, and Wa'ai Mauri. My contribution to the Talanoa on why arts is essential to the work of climate crisis. Just from the perspective of an arts educator here in Samoa, I think context is really important. I've worked with a lot of young people. All of us here have worked with a lot of young people, and I found my process as an educator through the arts is to tell stories, and the process in which I create my art or create the stories with my students. A lot of them come into our spaces with a lack of knowledge of a lot of issues, and not just climate crisis. So we pick a theme like climate crisis or gender violence or education, it is these students come to music or to dance because they're artists at heart. So we use the skills or the talents that they already have to then pursue a bigger issue that is bigger than us. So we use what we have. We have our God-given talents, and of course through education, they're given the skills to hone those talents to then accentuate the story. So in my process for the piece that my students are going to perform today, we really had to sit down and talk about many things. We had to unpack intergenerational trauma that is to do with both culture and the sky, the land and the sea. We had to unpack or even realize the generational gaps within their own households. So it's a lot of things that we need to discuss and then bring it down, hone it down to something like climate crisis, which is very connected to culture and to family and to community. So that is, so I was saying the arts, especially education, provides a process for, how shall I say, for deeper thinking, for deeper understanding. And through that process, we begin to understand how we feel. We are artists, and then we portray what we feel through our art. So, and then it resonates with others. So that's cute.
Thank you, Rosaviti.
Thank you. No, absolutely agree with your final points there. Yes, art is a deeper conversation, and it's one that we all share. And there's things that we know without understanding how we know them. And I think this is the importance of art in the conversation we have about climate change as well. Because we have a shared culture, we have a history together in the Pacific and in the world as well. And so art allows us to continue this conversation between ourselves at a much deeper level than conversing even in science. Science is a cerebral activity. Art takes us to the heart, and that's something we can share together.
Thank you. Thank you, Michael. This is a question for Joe, Michael, Okalani, and Moana. How do you marry your advocacy and policy work and your creative endeavours? How do you make it all work together? Advocacy, policy work, and creative endeavours. Joe, would you like to start off?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think for me, the framing that helps me is the how of how do we actually get some of these initiatives over the line. That's policy, right? You can read as many policy documents as you want and it'll have it all in there. But the why is where arts comes in, because the why is so important, because it reminds you of what, you know, of what we're doing, the purpose of what we're doing, and it keeps you going during those rough spells when you can't get policy initiatives over the line. I think for Pacific climate activists, if we didn't have the importance of preserving our cultures and our identities, it'd be very hard to stay hopeful after, you know, Paris, or everything since Paris. But it's because we have that wire that keeps driving you know, our communities, our governments to keep going and keep forging ahead. And then if you look at our own history, again, that's the big one for us. You know, in the 1980s, for some of you who are young enough to be alive during that time, you know, the big issue was the nuclear-free Pacific. That was the big one for the region. And because of the importance of that subject, you know, a whole generation of artists rose up. I'm thinking about, you know, the Herbs, right? I'm pretty sure you guys know who the Herbs are. Go back a little bit further and you go to Samoa's independence movement. What got us through? You know, there are songs about the Mau, songs about, you know, everything that they went through that kind of carried the people through that time. And then go outside of the Pacific. There are all songs and art created from the apartheid era. So I think they're not two separate entities in themselves. They're in order for any kind of advocacy and activism to work, you need the arts and culture embedded in there. Otherwise, it's just a dry exercise.
Moana?
Just echoing what Joe's said, I think for myself, creative arts and advocacy really intertwine in quite natural ways. For me, I use dance as the weapon in a lot of climate campaigns or in a way to raise awareness on climate change. I've been doing, for instance, Whānai for nearly over 10 years. And I run a program here in Samoa called Tawhasila Wha'i, where we've engaged a lot of very young children, as young as 4 to young adults, to learn our culture and preserve our culture and keep it alive, but also intertwine that and see how it resonates with being cultural stewards and stewards for our environment and for sustainability. So it kind of very easily marries together. The program that we used to run, that we still do run in Sydney called Matawai, we've seen a lot of young leaders grow to be climate advocates, to really feel impassioned and empowered to be advocates for change. So you see how creative arts really easily marries into growing advocates, and hopefully they will influence policy. The government of Samoa, through Ministry of Natural Resources and Environment, has recently established a Samoa Youth Advisory Board. And we come from all walks of life. Some of us are creative, some of us are energy experts, and a whole range of other career paths. But we've all kind of bound together in this advisory board where we're now able to influence policy, and it's been approved by Cabinet. So I'm hoping to see very artistic and innovative ways to engage our young people and also influence policy for the future of our islands.
Thank you, Moana. And Michael, how do you juggle, merge, weave, collapse, advocacy work, policy work, and your creativity?
With some difficulty. Professionally, I work in agriculture research. So it's writing poetry being my main access, my main claim to fame in the arts. I use it to try to understand things that I couldn't quite grasp intellectually again. Challenges that I observed being faced by communities I was working with. Because when you go into remote communities and you're working together with the households, they have some major challenges that they're very brave people. So coming across this a lot of the time, especially when I was starting out, when I was much younger, I was struggling to understand and put to words what I thought about what was happening with them. And so poetry became an outlet for that, a means of trying to think about things that I couldn't quite express with my technical writing, the challenges that they were facing, and how and what could I do to help their lives and improve their livelihoods. So I think that's why I think it's just an avenue for me to think about things clearer in a way than I could if I was trying to think technically about a problem, because it helps me understand what is inside better. So that's how I've managed to marry, at least in my own head, what I'm doing technically and what I write.
Wonderful. That's wonderful. It makes me think of Rosaiviti, you talking about the centrality of feeling. You know, to move our minds, we need to move our bodies. To move our bodies, we need to move our spirits and our imagination. So that's a wonderful point. Okalani, how do you juggle policy, advocacy, creativity?
I think I don't juggle, but they are married. I liken my art to my advocacy work, and so we often play around with the term artivism. rather than activism, because our art is the way that we advocate for our people and our work. And so for me, I think when I think about my art and sort of the way that I use it, I think about how everything is so poetic when you really reflect back and look at it. For us as advocates in whatever space we do, we know we are planting seeds for trees and gardens will never see blossom. And whenever I think about my journey, I think about the mango tree my great-grandfather had planted before I was even born and before my mother was even born. And it stands in front of my house every day, and growing up, I enjoyed the fruits of that mango tree, and so did all of my cousins, and so did my mother. But my grandfather had passed away before he had seen that fruit. And in the same way, sometimes I reflect back on art as a reminder that when I feel stuck, it is not because things are not moving, but it is because things are not moving in my time. And things are not moving in the speed in which I might want it to, but I know that I am still watering, and I am still planting, and I am still waiting, because even if I do not see it fruit, somebody else will. So that's...
Okay, that is beautiful. That is beautiful. Okay, so let's sink down deeper from the level of generality to the specifics. What's one successful creative initiative that you'd like to share with us tonight? One successful initiative or project with creativity at its centre that you've used to advocate for climate justice. Could we just go from Joe to Okalani? Thank you.
I can't really speak for too many, for other initiatives, but I wouldn't call it an initiative, I would call it a tactic, and it's one that we've deployed, with the Fossil Fuel Treaty Initiative since, I would say, last year. So, classic example, we're in one of those long political meetings with heads of government, and we're in Port Vila in Vanuatu. And the first day of the meeting, we were trying to get ministers to be, really ambitious. And, we weren't really getting anywhere. It was a typical kind of meeting. And then that evening, we had a presentation from artists at the reception. And they were able to take the data, the reports, all that sort of stuff, and package it in a way that had some real emotional heft. And so what happened is I turned to my colleagues because I wasn't sure if I was seeing correctly. The ministers were crying. And so I think that's when it kind of dawned on us, the conference room panel or negotiation style is not the be-all and end-all. There are other levers we can pull to drive the kind of change that we want. And so that's a tactic that we've deployed in our work for the better part of nearly 2 years now. It's combining the policy chops and getting those messaging to the brain right, then also complementing that with some with the power of arts and culture. So yeah.
Exciting, great, thank you. Moana?
It's hard to think of one initiative that's been really successful for climate justice. Before I give my example, I just want to acknowledge that there was a recent Pacific film done by my sister in the audience here, Brianna, who was the host, as well as the Coconut team. And it was called The Forgotten Pacific. So it's available on YouTube. I think for a lot of our young Pacific children and youth who don't know what climate change is and what the effects are, the stories shared in this particular film really touch the heart and remind us that we don't need to be experts in climate change, but we just need to love our islands and want to do something to save it. So I'd just like to plug The Forgotten Pacific, and I encourage you to watch it. But my main example is the community that I've been a part of for the last 10 years, and it's a cultural centre in Sydney, Australia, called Matawai Pacific Cultural Arts, and it's what's influenced me to start Tāwhisi Lawhai. But there's a lot of negative stereotypes around Pacific people, and often because we come from small islands, we are treated as inferior in places where we are the minority. And I know this is a fact for when we go to spaces like COP. Our voices are often drowned out by bigger corporations and bigger wealthier nations. But Matawai is really a space to remind our children and young people of the positive fundamentals of our culture and really the essence, the Pacific way, which I mentioned. Pacific people have always been artists and creatives. You see the fala there rolled up as a drum just at the front. That's made from the land. Our most precious treasures, our iakonga and our mats, are made from the land. And there's so much traditional knowledge wrapped in that and how to treat the land and how to sustain it and manage it. So Matawai, we've got about 400 young people. We teach them culture through dance and music, but quite naturally, we try and encourage them to use their gifts and talents to put themselves in social, political, or environment spaces where they can fight for their islands. And we also remind them that knowledge is power, and one of the most powerful knowledge systems in the Pacific is our cultural knowledge. And our ancestors for centuries weaving, stenciling, tattooing, oral traditions, dancing and singing as a way to tell our stories. And I'd also like to acknowledge the work of our panel here because they do a lot of work in really taking complex themes and breaking it down, especially Joe and his team, who recently paired with Coldplay and, really brought the voices of the Pacific to international stages.
Oh, wonderful, wonderful. Michael, I'm just double backing questions, but I'm wondering if you could talk about your creative grants pilot for your Ple Sing Sing project.
Yes. That's, so Ple Sing Sing is well, first of all, Ple Sing Sing is the cultural name used by in the Highlands region for a common area where people are allowed to speak. So it's different from the houseman or the men's house, where, of course, only the men are allowed to speak. And even then, it's the senior men or those with some clout and recognition. So, but the Ple Sing Sing is open for all. And so that's what we've named our writing organization, Ple Sing Sing, because we want to invite all writers and the audience to come and take part in the conversation that we're having in terms of poems and essays and writing short stories. So that's the idea of Ple Sing Sing. We've been rather busy, my colleagues and I. I didn't know that all four of us were going to go for PhDs at the same time. So that's been a different challenge, but a good one. I think it's probably an outcome of pursuing that. At least I know for myself. As I said, I've been writing technical work a lot of the time and using poetry to express myself in another way and understand things differently. So I think the same thing was happening with my friends. So Ple Sing Sing has mostly been struggling with. It's been self-funded, out of pocket, until we chanced upon the Commonwealth Foundation grants that were being offered. I think that was in 2022. So that represented to us a really good opportunity to do everything that we were struggling with in a much more fluid manner. And really what we wanted to do was support competitions, so writing contests, especially for school children. So writing poems, essays, and short stories, and going around to different schools and encouraging children, talking with them during assembly time to get them into writing and expressing themselves. So that was part of the program. And then going as far as collecting those stories and essays and poems and publishing them in a book. And I think we did that with two primary schools. One has been more successful, and their book was just published last week. So that's been an excellent adventure for us. The most popular activity we run, which is climate change related, is a children's contest, and that's always a really interesting time to read all that material. It's quite exhausting apart from all the other reading we have to do, but because we get inundated, the kids love to take part in the creative writing, and I think that's a great thing. This kind of competition, organization hasn't existed in the country for many years, and certainly getting the support from the Commonwealth Foundation to push those activities forward, was the best thing. So it's been so good that I've actually, and my boss might say this on camera, but I've actually decided to retire from work for a bit, take some time out, and next year is 100% dedication to Plight and finishing off those objectives. So,
well, we wish you well with your sabbatical. Rosa, do you want to share one successful initiative or project?
Hello? Thank you. I think we're sitting on a platform that recognizes a lot of initiatives that are recognized regionally and internationally. I think I would like to take this moment to acknowledge the unsung heroes who work a lot on the community level. I am in a position, I am so fortunate in my whole life to be surrounded by so many passionate workers with climate change and the now climate crisis. And I too was very emotionally taken by Brianna's latest work with her. So I remember her when she was very young. I like to acknowledge organizations that engaged young children and schools. The success there is measured in, well, not then, but years later when they do become climate warriors. I think community, parents, the societies are really, really important, and they are part of the success stories. My introduction into climate change and climate crisis, Talanoa, I was in primary school in Fiji. My older sister, she was already working for WWF. And I do remember one night she came home, she was out with her colleagues, and they had to rescue a turtle. And the turtle was named Oscar, and Oscar spent the night in our tub. And Oscar made it to the newspapers the week later. And I was really excited about that. At that age, I wasn't fully aware. You know, like for many young people, you're not fully aware of the issue at hand. But then when you're surrounded by people like my sister and Monifa Few, she is Rutuman, she's a relative of mine, but her work is quite strong in the realm of climate crisis and with culture, and she founded Lache Rotuma, and that organization initiative takes a lot of people back to Rotuma, go back to the roots. Right now, she's taken a few young people back to Rotuma for eco camp. So it's taking a lot of young people back to, there's no electricity. You learn to live off the land, and then you get to appreciate the land, and then you learn what you're fighting for. So I think for all our success stories up here, it's their societies that have supported them till now.
Thank you, Rosam. Before you answer, Okolani, just have a think about one traditional Pacific knowledge or practice that you think would heal the world. So just have a think about that, and I'd like to hear about your initiative, successful against the fight for global climate change.
I don't want to. I am mindful of time, and I don't want to take up too much. But I think if I were to share one successful initiative, it would actually be the movement or the initiative that brought me into the climate movement, and that was the saying or the campaign that Pacific Climate Warriors ran, which was, "We are not drowning, we are fighting." And it was a very, very powerful 2 sentences. And I actually remember when I was 14 to 15 hearing it for the first time, not understanding what it had meant until I had learned more about the climate movement and I had felt the hopelessness sink in. And I remember feeling like a victim or feeling like this is it. As a Samoan young girl, I have nothing I can do or contribute to this movement that will change the 1.5 that Paris has come out with. And I remember hearing the words, "We are not drowning, we are fighting," for the first time, and feeling my perspective shift. Feeling my perspective shift from, I will not allow the people in power who are responsible for the destruction of our planet, profiting off of my grief, to know that I feel like a victim. And so the Pacific Climate Warriors actually made, I think it just finished, it was like a 10-year-long campaign where they made sure to shift that narrative from Pacific Islanders being victims to actually being at the front lines fighting for this movement and fighting for other people. And I remember seeing Brianna, I remember seeing Joe, I remember seeing so many people go to COP movements knowing they were so small and still fight and still push these initiatives and still push these issues and feeling so emboldened to join. And so I think a good example of really powerful, impactful campaigns is just the saying, "We are not drowning, we are fighting."
Thank you. And for once, Brianna, you are not on stage, but you are. You so are. Thank you, Brianna. Yeah, okay, so we've got 10 minutes left of our panel Q&A, and then I'm going to open it up to the audience. Joe, one specific traditional knowledge or wisdom that could heal the world, in your opinion? Actually, the question is reach a better balance with nature, which I read as healing the world. So,
Sorry, what was the question?
One specific knowledge or wisdom or practice that you believe can help heal us, the world, nature.
That is a big question.
That's why I gave you time to think about it. Yeah.
Thanks. You know, it's hard to boil down thousands of years of traditional knowledge into a question. I mean, I can think of, individual principles like tuples, where you let the land go fallow, and, the principle of regeneration. That's something that this world, sorely needs. But I think on the whole, the traditional knowledge that certainly Samoa and the rest of the Pacific has to offer is what will heal the world. And I think if we can go back to that, I'm going to bring Brianna up again, but I love what Brianna said about, I have a vision because my grandparents have memories, right? And so to me, as someone in the arts and culture scene, music is very important to this, because it's not the trivial kind of music that we're speaking about, but music in the way that it was meant for by our ancestors. Like traditional, certainly for Samoa, our music is not just songs, it's an archive of ancestral knowledge, right? And so if we can inspire our own artists and artisans and those people to speak and to sing and to curate these struggles that we're going through as our forebears once did, I think that'll be a really good concept. And then bringing that forward, bringing that traditional knowledge forward in a continually fresh and new way to address the challenges that we're facing now, I think that'll be, music is the library of our ancestors. Why not do that?
Nice.
Thanks.
Nice, Joe. Music is the library of our ancestors, indeed. Moana.
Thank you. A very hard question, but I think a big thing in the Pacific is not moving as an individual, but how we are stronger together. I used to work at a museum where we had a lot of Pacific cultural artifacts, and I used to spend time in silence, like observing these artifacts and how they were made. And what it really taught me was the reverence that we have for the land and the ocean, and how we all have a role to play. And that can be in many different parts of our lives. But for instance, Māori from Aotearoa, when they make korowai, there's There's a role to play in weaving. There's a role to play in getting the plants. There's a role to play in mending the plants so that they're ready. There's, everyone has a role to play in the climate justice movement in our communities. And I think when we're together, we're stronger. I think also really drawing upon our gifts and talents and the cultural backgrounds that we come from and the traditional knowledges that may come from your own cultures and how that can heal the world.
So I think I'm still learning about the Pacific and coming here as part of that process as well. Papua New Guinea being the big island and on you might say on the outskirts of the Pacific. I think, as far as I know for Papua New Guinea, I think it may be the same in the Pacific, in the islands, is that we don't separate ourselves from the land. It's why we've got, in Papua New Guinea, as you probably hear, we've got so many landowner issues and people, anyhow, all of that. I think it's because you can't separate yourself from the land that the idea of selling it is alien to us. And I think that's that has its, I think that's a deep thing for us, because we still identify with the land and we know that we're going back to it. And I think that gives us a better chance of talking about maintaining our land and keeping it safe and secure. And I feel that that must be the same in the Pacific, because we do identify culturally with where we are and the plants and the animals, and that's part of our identity. And I think that's an important thing that we can show, especially the Western world and the modern lifestyles that we're living now. We still have that. We still maintain that link, that close connection to land.
Thank you. I am part of a team that has been researching or trying to revive traditional musical instruments and customs here in Samoa for the past pre-COVID time. And part as any research, the more questions than there are answers. Apart from the lack of knowledge that our people have of our traditional musical instruments and the context that they come from, we have been in households around Savaii and Samoa, Savaii and Upolu all over. I think there's been more than 50 households where we had interviewed older people, their children, and their children's children. So that we've been interviewing generations of Samoans. And one of the biggest concerns that we had was the lack of storytelling from generation to generation to generation. Living in one household, you could have an elder grandfather who knows the context of the pu'esi, which is from the esi leaf, and there's a frond, and then it's used back in their generation as a plaything that they used to kill time when they're in the plantation, and so the form of entertainment. But in his household, his son wouldn't know what that was, and then his son would not know what that was. So there's living in one house, the generation gap is concerning, and that's because storytelling is not prevalent, and that should come back, I think.
I agree. Okalani.
Okay, I'll try and be very quick. I know we've run out of time, but when I think of a traditional practice that would heal the world, I always go back to the Samoan practice, and I think it's a Pacific Island practice as well, of burying your child's umbilical cord in the ground that they're from. And I know this is shared in indigenous cultures as well, but when I think of that concept, I don't think about it just literally, but I think about the spirituality of it. When we root ourselves in the earth, the same earth we come from is the same earth we will go back to. And so the idea of burying your umbilical cord or burying a part of you in the land that you are from reminds you to stay rooted, reminds you to stay grounded, but it's also the idea of bringing yourself back to the environment, bringing yourself back to learning and unlearning ways that perhaps colonialism, perhaps capitalism has taught us to stay in concrete buildings. And so I think the idea and the practice of going back to nature and reconnecting with the spiritual, environmental lessons and traditional practices we have of stewardship, I truly think that heals the world, because to know where you're from is to know what you're fighting for. And when we do not know what we're fighting for, or we do not feel that hope, it is because we are disconnected from the community that we came from. So I think that's something that I think would heal the world.
A beautiful word, so articulate. So just to wrap up our panel discussion, we're going to hear from a group of Tongan artists who are definitely rooted in Tonga and everywhere. Their name is Seleka International. They're a non-profit which aims to promote visual and performing art practices in Tonga and to contribute to the international exposure of Tongan art and artists. Following the traumatic experiences arising from the volcanic eruption in January 2022 in Tongatapu, artists from Seleka International painted more than 19 uplifting murals all around the island with support from the Commonwealth Foundation. The lead artist was Devita Latu, who worked with a core team of 9 fellow artists in collaboration with the local community. In this video, we hear directly from Devita and other artists about the impact of their project.
Years ago, we would struggle to be given a permit by anybody to do anything on their walls. It had been a long dream for us to be able to do murals. With the monetary subsidies by the Commonwealth, we were able to live out that dream. My name is David Dalatu. I'm from Tonga, the main island. I went overseas to study art, and after I came back, my vision to have some sort of art training venue. So it started at around my house. We managed to build a little studio and named the Seleka. Nobody understood what we were doing. And these kids were mostly, about 90% from broken homes. So kids that run away from home. It suddenly turned from art studio refuge for these artists. And we were very much misunderstood. So I thought, well, maybe we can take this out to the street and make the noise there. Maybe educate the public somehow. By just having the artwork presented there, people can get acquainted to looking at things artistic. And it's for them to interpret and judge. And we'll give it to the rundown houses and derelict buildings, just to give it a new life. Everyday man would go search and look for something beautiful. Well, I see the beauty in this. And to give it a spirit, give it life again, I think it becomes a living being again. The funding surely initiated all this project. From providing material to transport, just sustenance, everything. And I mean, we were empowered knowing that Commonwealth were behind us. So from the core art group, there were 8 of us. So 2 girls, 5 grown-ups, and one kid.
Before que anota for me au formatala megita. Na ko pe me ngai programa ni ho lanu before que e te ma e time o alo ko ta e mu ai kakai pe o
Pea ko se alahe e ngā ko wako mea lahi e kauke a te ko poto he whatamai. Oku whaoke mau api e ko kauke a te. Oku e kaike lahi e whainga maali e ai ka gai whewhine, ke nau tā holisi e tongani, ka kua monu ia, ko kau ke he wali wali tā holisi.
Pe koe ngahi āti koe ni mui, koe ngahi āti whakatonga pe. Ka ku ngahi āti whakatonga, ka ku nau lea whakapālangi. Ai koe ngahi āti koe ni koe ngahi kupesi pe tau whangakui, pe koe ngahi pe tēni pe tau whangakui, ke tau i pe fuo koe laine, ka koe ki liliu lahi, koe ki liliu pe mihe e tau whangakui, ki he kuonga ia koe ni. O ko tui koe mea nei lawa ki o wako pe mi e porokalama koe ni lahi au pito kai ngata pe i e āti mi e ngahi tau keina ku mau me e āti ka koe kono o mai whakataha e community o sio e ngahi whakatata ka ulawa lewa he ngahi miro koe na mau whakatu o mai e whanau koe mātua e ria koe na mau iei lawa ke mau tala noa. I have people, I have always met them in town, see them everywhere. We never spoke. But after this project, they would approach me and say how much they admire the work. We felt like, oh wow, something has come out of this. But it was never for our own gratification. It was more for the public to be educated. O eke mai pu na whawhawhai he āti o nei whai mo nau manu kau nau whai tā.
O ku mahu inga au pito nai whakatātā koe ni, hono tā holo koe e ungahi kolo. Tau te whito ki ngai wheitu u koe o ku pehehe ngai koloia koe o ku ri ake. O ku tui nai fo o pe uraki taimi koe na nau mamata ki ai ka ia taimini o ku sai ia au pito e kolo moe kakai e community. He sio ki ngai whatātā ka tau te whito o ku.
Since we started this project, people came out of the woodwork and requesting and asking what there was to be done. The public in general are getting to be more understanding of contemporary art, and hopefully for the next generation this will become the norm, so it won't be so much of a struggle for the next artist generation to fight this, to make it accepted.
Oh, a hand for Seleka International. Wonderful. So just as art moves our bodies to move our minds, we're going to have a roving mic Q&A while Joe, and this is our Home Pacific artist for climate justice, set up on stage. So, anyone got a line of language with a question mark after it? For any of our artists? Yes.
Hello. Well, it was great to listen to all those inputs, but I'm wondering whether we apply it to ourselves. It is worthwhile, I think, at situations like this to ask ourselves the question whether we apply the same characteristics to us. I look at this panel here, it's 400 feet of PVC, hugely destructive, completely unnecessary. We ourselves, when we've done it, we've completely abandoned the use of it. I can understand there can be justification for it. I'm wondering whether there had been debates about using it or not, or whether people never even realized it was happening.
Thank you. Anyone from the panel like to address the use of environmentally unfriendly materials, or is that environmentally unfriendly, or is it recycled plastic, or does anyone in the panel want to respond? Yes.
Hi, sure, I can, I think from my own perspective, and I am a baby in the climate movement, I think the way that I have reconciled the fact that we still use a lot of non-renewable materials within our day-to-day lives is the idea that at the end of the day, as somebody who comes from a small island nation, it is a privilege to afford and access recyclable materials, or materials that are able to be, what's the word? The best way I can describe it is when people from small island nations, for example, travel to places like COP using a plane, I am often asked the question, how can you come to an international meeting using a plane and advocate for climate crisis. If I had the privilege to afford to take a vessel and travel thousands of hours, I absolutely would, but I am not offered that opportunity, and I cannot afford to take that opportunity based on my circumstances. And so at the end of the day, I try my very best to practice sustainable uses, but I also understand there is a boundary in terms of resourcing and also accessibility for people that come from small island nations. But I think the question that you posed, it is very important to, in every practice that you do, find ways to be more sustainable, but also understand there are some things that you cannot compromise based on situation. That's my response.
Good answer. Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for the question. Yes, question over here, and then I'm just going to walk to the back for anyone who would like to ask.
Hello, I'm Talofa. I've been practicing my Talofa.
With a smile?
With a smile, with a smile. I feel like if I have to sing my question as well, a panel of artists, you know, but they say that the Trini accent is a very sing-song accent already. So I'll just go ahead and ask my question. As an artist, one of the most important things is to be authentic and truthful to self. Your art, when you produce it, you have to be very truthful, you have to be very intentional, you have to be very authentic. However, when you get a grant to produce some sort of art, it normally comes with stipulations, criteria, and certain things that might not necessarily agree with what you represent and what you're about. Additionally, as art becomes more popular, you'd find that there are political activists and political tools and political makers and all of those things, people of power, hegemonic structures that try to use art as a tool for their own agenda. So my question to you is, how do you prevent yourself from becoming a victim of those powers that may be, that choose to hijack your art and then try to manipulate it for their own agendas and their own narratives? So that's my question to you. How do you stay authentic? Because you all know about the suffering artists as well, right? When you need money, you need the money to survive. So that's my question that I toss over to you all.
Fantastic question, and this will be our final question. Sorry, everybody, but you'll be available this evening. Would you like to answer that, Rosa?
Oh, yes. Thank you. Thank you so much for touching a very sensitive topic. We artists, yes, we tend to. I've had to come away from calling myself a struggling artist, and I think the first step there needs to be a change in perspective, and a second would be to see, to align yourself with other people who are necessarily not artists, but who may have the same goals as you. It is hard to say no to money when you're an artist. I have just started with with my brother and my colleague Olivia. We have started Sofa Music Samoa, and we've just started, like, literally in months. And these are one of the many questions that we do ask ourselves. And the only solution that we have for ourselves is to create supporting businesses, so that we are not what's the word? We don't have to adhere to all those criteria. So for us here in the islands, in our context, and to be our own bosses, so that we be true to our art and be true to our calling, which is in education. We found out that not many people here in the islands, in the region, and very few people outside of our region would want to support a fledgling young music school. We've decided that in the next 2 years, or even shorter, that we will create our own supporting businesses for that very reason. Yeah.
Wonderful, thank you so much. And
which is why arts and business is very important.
Lovely, thank you. Please join me in thanking our panellists, our artists. We're now moving on to the second part of our evening, so it's my pleasure to introduce, this is our home Pacific Artists for Climate Justice, The Pacific, as we know, has led the call for climate justice for decades. This is our home. Pacific Artists for Climate Justice unites Indigenous artists and storytellers from across the Pacific to advocate for climate action and a fossil-free future in order to preserve our homes. They use the power of arts, culture, poetry and music to create change and compelling narratives, weaving together traditional forms with modern digital storytelling. This is Our Home is a major storytelling project of the Fossil Fuel Non-Proliferation Treaty Initiative and a key component of its Pacific campaign, where the momentum for the global push for several key climate policies began. Ladies and gentlemen, please show your appreciation for This Is Our Home.
Yeah, an intro video, please.
Okay. Now, and there's just a short intro video, so I needn't have said all that.
Band called This Is Our Home. And this band come from New Zealand and the Pacific Islands, as far away from here as you can imagine. And they are going around the world singing together to bring attention to everything that's going on with the oceans and with our planet.
Musicians, it serves as a reminder about the power and the responsibility that we have to tell stories, that we are the messengers of our reality. It is really important for us to hold close to our stories, and it's how we pass our stories on from generation to generation. This is how we choose to present our music.
Check, mic, check. Malo lei, talofalava, disan bulavanaka, kia ora, kia orana, and warm Pacific greetings to everyone here. This is Our Home, Pacific Artists for Climate Justice, and today we're so honored to share some songs with you and some stories of our experiences this year. So we hope you enjoy. Malo. Sa ole mo elelei Matauti ale mitinei Uasua tutu I tele mai le tai Ualolo vai Au a whau I le tawhalangi Malama maua I le langi Lea I sena I loa le pongai Ua mafuai E la umiti ua whai Mata pupula He mumu pei se afi Ai se au He mumu ai mamohu Ve whaape whea e pupula malosi ai Whaafua se ona mo Mata pupula naia te le lava. E mā vai ona tūlanga I le soifua mai o tangata. Wanga ona mana ia ai mai sele mamalu o e o ia mau ai loa ona hava mamatau tau tuana tuanga umaia e mo o mia lo toe fo I mai ma le tau sa afia e mo o mia lo toe fo I mai ma le tau sa afia mata pupula. Can we get a round of applause for Brianna and Moy? Before we start this next song, I'm just going to introduce the team right now. So we've got Loni Javier here, all the way from the Kingdom of Tonga. We've got Lahi Vauese, who's from Samoa and Tuvalu. Junior Songeta from the islands of Fiji and Samoa. William Fa'apito from Samoa. And myself, Shone Pole, Tonga and Samoa. And as I said, we are Pacific Artists for Climate Justice. And this year we've been so blessed with opportunities to bring these Pacific stories to the international stage. And I think one thing that we realized throughout those experiences is the power that arts has. Because we often focus too much of our efforts towards the brain and the mind that we forget about the main things, our heart, our body, and our soul. And so, as Pacific Artists, this next song has been written by my brother Junior Songeta here, who's going to explain a little bit more about it. Mana?
Awesome. How's everyone feeling this evening? All good? Thumbs up if you're feeling good.
Yeah.
All right. So I wrote the song when I was actually introduced to the climate space, which was February this year with my brothers. And I felt like as an artist, there was a call, a call for creative artists to continue to support this movement. And so I wrote this song called This Is Our Home, and hope you enjoy. Big brother, oh my brother, can you see my heart hurting? Can you see my heart hurting? And sister, oh my sister, the lights are getting low, and I can see the hope in our tomorrow. But to save our future, there's something you gotta do. For the answer to this equation starts with me and you. We've got to find our way back home. Oh, can we go back to where we were before? Oh, our fathers and mothers, our sisters and brothers, come with me to save it all. This is our home. Oceans are rising, temperature is high. Can we find a way to break the tide? Homes are slowly fading, houses slipping away. I can't take it anymore. But to save our future, there's something you gotta do. Navanua, Vura Vura, Navanua. For the answer to this equation starts with me and you. Vura Vura, Navanua. We've got to find our way back home. Oh, can we go back to where we were before? Oh, our fathers and mothers, our sisters and brothers, our sisters and brothers, come with me to save it all. This is our home. Make it. Ura ura na nonda vale, auna tango makabinaka, benga duda que mata, kamumulu itaka, berambula kina nonda kawa, ena beisinga ni matata. Find our way back home. Oh, can we go back to where we were before? Oh, our fathers and mothers, our sisters and brothers, our sisters and brothers. Oh, come with me to save it all. This is our home.
We need the stand. I need the stand, sir. Thank you. I'm calling up now Okalani Mariner, who will be sharing some of her poetry with us. Her poetry is a powerful call to action for Pacific youth, urging them to carry forward the wisdom of our ancestors in the fight against climate change. It reflects on the grief we endure while striving to protect our ocean and environment, embodying the resilience of Pacific people. This poem speaks to the enduring struggle for the survival of our lands and waters for both present and future generations. Please welcome to the stage Okalani Mariner. Thank you.
Mic check, testing, mic check, 1, 2. I've been tasked with the unfortunate position of going after singers and dancers, and I am neither. So you will be stuck with my words. But yes, that was such a beautiful. Oh, I still have goosebumps just listening. But yeah, unfortunately, I do not have a beautiful voice or I'm good with my feet. So today, I think, while I was given the opportunity to stand before you all, I was reflecting on what I wanted to say. And I think after the dialogue we just had, perhaps I'll start with a little bit about myself and how I actually moved into the climate movement. So for your information, and not many people actually know this, I stumbled into the climate space through grief. As a teenager, I often journaled, and the moment in which my journaling actually turned into poetry, which turned into climate activism, was when my grandfather had passed away about 6 years ago. And my grandparents for Pacific Islanders play such a huge role in raising and learning from. And because, like my panelists mentioned, they were the story keepers, I grew up learning stories about my ngafa, which is my genealogy. And my grandfather was very, very passionate about knowing your ngafa and knowing where you came from and knowing the people that came before you, because it will help you ground your feet no matter where you go. And I think in tribute and in honor of the grandparents I have lost over the last 6 years, which is about 6 total, I thought I would ground myself here in front of you all and share about them and share their legacy. And so for me, when he had passed, I remembered one of the last things I had said to him was actually a promise to keep telling his stories and keep telling my ngafa and to remember where I came from. But in promising him that, I realized I would not be keeping my promise if I was not also protecting the home he had asked me to tell stories about. And so I started reflecting on, what am I promising my grandfather when he leaves? I'm promising him I'm going to tell them stories of the fishes, of the food I ate, the home I was raised in. But what home is there if it's not going to exist when my children are born and when my children come into this world because of the climate crisis and because of sea level rise? And so my poem was actually, in its original drafts, his obituary. It was the words I had promised him while he was drawing his final breath, and it was the words I had promised him when we buried him. But it is a reflection of my journey. I think grief is so interconnected with the climate crisis and the way that I fight and I advocate. And I think I also wanted to share a little bit more of a morbid perspective on artivism, but it is nonetheless mine. And in being authentic and being myself, I wanted to share this all with you. But my grandfather, he told me how I was born from water and earth. When the land and sea wove my mother and father's destinies together, that my life is tied to the saltwater seas as deeply as my spirit is rooted in the earth. Remember, Fulisie Langitele, he said. Remember to tell our stories to your children. Tell them they are coconut husk, dipped in salt water and woven into our fue with stories of our past. And tell them that the ocean no longer speaks to us, that the wind no longer whispers, and the earth has stilled beneath our feet. My unborn children will never know the land and sea as I have. The same ocean I have been called to protect is poisoned. The cord that tethers me home is tearing my roots to the land, rotting. The same spirits that breathed life into me now cry out that our earth is dying. And to my unborn children, I will fight for you. I swear by the moana I have been called to protect, and the whanua I am bound to, I will fight for you. Remember I fought for you, that we fought for you. Remember we fought those whose hands were stained with blood and oil. Remember we fought those who asked us to stand by and grieve instead of rage. And when your roots flourish and the ocean sings to you again, remember us. Thank you.
Thank you, Okalani. Grief and rage, passion, honour, honour, honour. Just calling up to the stage now, Michael Dom, who will read us two poems. One of them is a romantic poem, now we're talking, which also talks about the wild weather on Savaii some years after major floods, which have occurred again in 2023. So please welcome Michael back to the stage.
So I've taken a bit of license, actually. I was going to read two of my own poems, but I have mentioned that my organization, Plus Sing Sing, runs competitions. And in, I think it was 2022, we ran a World Environment Day poetry contest. And for the first time, we opened up the competition to older Papua New Guineans. It was usually just for school children. And we had some great poems come through. Unfortunately, the one I'm going to read was late by a week. But when I read this poem, I knew that it was the winner. So I had a very, very tricky decision to make. Was I going to squeeze it in before I'd given the poems to the judges, or would I disqualify it because it was more than a week late? I decided to disqualify it, sadly, because everyone else had put in the effort to come in on time, and I felt that I had to do them honor that way. But this young lady is, it was written by a young lady. Her name is Kaija Aroga, and she's from the Eastern Highlands province. And I wasn't able to get in touch with her at first because she was actually ill in hospital. So that was also a sad thing. But I think you'll understand why I thought this poem was going to be the winner anyway, if it had been in. And in my opinion, it would have been really unfair. She's really good. The poem competition was judged by a Samoan poetess, Faumina Felolini Maria Tafunai, I think, who is currently in New Zealand. So, and it goes, "We are one and the same." Excuse me. Sorry to pull that Barack Obama stunt. We are one and the same. The secret to loving everything is to love just one thing. When I saw her, it was on a pale eve, when the last of the light was taking leave. And so I loved the sunset that revealed her to me, along with the rain trees that sheltered the park on the night. She looked my way and smiled at the sight of whatever it was that amused her, enough to cast me a bemused smile. But it's while the wind makes golden waves of the honeydew fields on sultry noons that I talk about her to the pale moon. Then I love the way nature responds in silent whispers, like her voice, a hushed breeze that calms and the soul lingers. To love the forests we tread and the mountains we hiked, to wish no harm came to her coral reefs where we scuba dived. To love one thing is to love everything. Because in the sand are her footprints, and on the hilltops are the missing links that pointed me home. So in loving her and everything else was to love the flowers she cherished and the others about to diminish. To love the lands she traversed was to want them protected and conserved. To say this is her history, this is her people, this is her heritage, is to say these are still mine too, and I am proud of the same privilege. To call this part of the southern sky hers and my home, and to want nothing more than for it to remain a pristine evergreen dome. Being one and the same, though bearing different names. My hands, the coarse color of brown earth from which we were formed. Her womb, the birthplace of generations yet to be born. Our home, a lush mass in an ocean of blue. I know not the difference between me and you. Thank you. And the second poem. So the second poem is a piece I wrote, as Selena explained, after a visit to Savai'i. And okay, it is a little bit erotic. It's a romantic poem, but I think it was at a time when my partner and I were also having difficult times. And so visiting Savai'i and talking about the destruction that had occurred there and how people were recovering, and then spending the evening in one of the fales there, I think it helped. One night, one day on Savai'i. What does the wind say to the sea? Do you hear them roaring at each other in this storm that batters our boat like fale? Hear them crash in fury against those rocks, sitting mutely on the shoreline, waiting to rend our tender flesh, to blend us, bones and all, in brine. But we, with fearless joy, ride out the rampage in our buoyant bed. What words lullaby us asleep under the palms? Did you hear that wind? Did you hear what that wind said to this sea? Lazing on their threshold under a loving sun, we are naked flesh to be salted in the sand, while those warm waves lick our bodies, jealously soaking through your sarong, to trace your panty line with sunburn that leaves marks which mirror match the welts of our noisy lovemaking. I want to be where the wind whips the sea, in our stormproof fale on Savai'i. Thank you.
Michael, you are the meanest judge in the whole world, and I hope that you forever pay penance by reading that poet's poem. And your own poem wasn't so bad either. Thank you. Once When We Were Gods, written and choreographed by Alosa Solomona, this dance poem takes us back to the time of our ancestors, where spirits and gods of the land, sea and sky lived commonly among the rest of the natural world. Never was there a land so green nor a sea so deeply blue. The natural world was a wonder to behold, but only when the shark, the octopus and other sea beasts were gods. Now, if they were to return, what would they have to say? This piece will be followed by Ross's brother Filton's music, written by Filton Solomona and featuring 3 young artists from Samoa. The World's All Plastic is a song about our disconnection from nature, about how in our race towards global economic development, we find ourselves surrounded by an artificial environment dominated by plastic. Filton will then lead us out with music. We will follow Filton, and we will then behold as our finale the fire dance performed by Moi Moana. And just to explain about the fire dance, the Samoan art of siva afi, or fire knife dancing, expresses our fight for the survival of our islands, bringing to life the stories, struggles, and resilience of the Pacific, a strong reminder to protect and sustain our culture, land, and oceans for future generations. Please give a hand for Rosa, her brother, and then we will file out and follow the music. Thank you.
Once when we were gods, tonight's performance is dedicated to two of the Moana, the most sea-loving people I know, and both in climate change, my sister Penina Solomon in Fiji and Monifa Fiu in Rotuma. Perhaps you may have heard of I, of we, in the far-gone whispers from your grandparents' whangongo or hanuchu, memories under the starlit skies. Stories passed on from the core roots of your family tree to you, the young leaflet. I, we, whether in the reality, generations before yours, or in your fantasies you have chosen to cage us in. We once ruled the aquatic realms beneath the horizons, our domain, our birthright given to us to rule and coexist, to keep nature's delicate balance. Once, when we were gods. We, conceived out of sciences your greatest minds have failed to decipher, like the genetics of Papa, goddess of the land, and Ranginui, a god of the skies and birds and clouds, share with I, we, who roamed the different shades of the blue continent in time when the goddess Hikuleo of the darkest and deepest trenches stood guard of Pulotu, when Pulotu was a real entrance to the afterlife, and not a symbiotic metaphor tossed around in careless Talanoa for self-authentication of a heritage you chose to let go. Once, when we were gons, we took many forms: sharks, octopus, turtles and whales, crabs, great and small, creatures of the sea, predator or prey. We had our balance, we had our place. But one day when Nafanua uttered enlightenment, we became irrelevant. Then we became mythical, close to forgotten. You, in the billions today, are creatures of the land. You have taken more than we can give, unnaturally farmed my kin to feed your kin, as if you did not know the concept of family planning. You blasted my home, drilled our waterbeds, leaving us in nothing but ruin and sedimentary chaos. Exactly how you blasted, drilled, and ruined your own home through war, through industrial pursuit, through greed and enlightenment and supremacy. Once, when we were gons, we never choked on plastic, nor blinded by the toxic slime of your oil spills. Never did we lack food, nor feel sick through our scales. Neither did our waters boil us to poison. Is this how cancer is to you? What, pray tell, did we do to anger you so? How have we wronged you? When really the rise in my waters and the sinking of your shores is no fault of we, but of you, the engineers of Earth's demise, with your unnatural technology upsetting nature's balance, the so-called enlightened. Your rootless family trees and withered leaves have left you orphaned, disconnected, disrespectful, destructive, costly. Where have you lost your place in the sanctity of the Va? Now nothing but a symbiotic metaphor tossed around in careless Talanoa for your self-authentication of a heritage you have chosen to be a myth. Once, when we were gods, the sky, the land, the sea were in harmonious balance. You respected me, I respected you. Together, we respected the Va, the spaces between I and we, us and you, back when we were gods. Our Va, once sacred. But now, no more.
music. Thank you.